Hi guys, Simpson here. Welcome to the Focus Capital podcast. On this episode, I interview Brian Gordon. Ryan is a real estate professional. He's also an investor, and he also teaches a college course on real estate investing here in the GTA. We have a great conversation about what he's doing personally in terms of real estate investing. We talk about the market and also how he's helping other people to get into real estate investing through his college course. So I think it's an episode you're going to get a lot out of. And if you're interested in finding out more about what we're up to at Focus Capital, I invite you to check out our website, focuscapital.ca. On there, you can find a lot of great resources. If you leave your email, you get access to our newsletter and our investing guides as well. And with that, I hope you enjoy the show. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here, Stephen.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. We've known each other for some time through various investment groups that we're part of. And I think you've got a great story. I think you're someone who is not only implementing different investing strategies in the real estate space, but you're also teaching others how to do it, which I think is fantastic. And on the personal development side, I think you and I have a lot in common as well in terms of the things you're interested in. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today and learning a bit more about the details of what you're up to. So maybe to kick things off, it would be great if you could just talk a little bit more about what some of those early influences were growing up and maybe what kind of pushed you to get into real estate. I know you had a career in real estate, but also you're doing things on the personal side as well. Talk a bit about what some of those early influences were. Was it a book or a mentor or something that came across your path, which sort of piqued your interest and steered you towards real estate?
Yeah. So I would say it really started. It wasn't a book. It wasn't a mentor. It was probably my mother at an early age. She has always instilled on us to buy real estate, and not necessarily as a real estate investor, but at least at the bare minimum, owning your own home. And that's something she continued to instill in all of us. So I have two other brothers. And so I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just knew that, because I obviously trusted and loved my mother, that real estate was going to be the avenue that I was going to use to one day build wealth. And I think that's when then reading different books, like many of us investors have read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Multiple Streams of Income, some of my favorite earlier books that I've read, and just continuing to read, listen to podcasts as I got older, and just really finding my way to different real estate groups and different strategies to kickstart my journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what were some of the first maybe steps that you took to look into real estate? Was it learning from others or trying to do a deal yourself? Or what were some of those initial steps maybe that you took to start your journey there?
Yeah, great question. So initially, I think I bought my first property when I was 22, but it was for my principal residence. It wasn't really about investing. Again, it was just taking in what my mother had told me over the years. And so I bought my second property when I was probably 23, 24, again, semi-detached in a terrible neighborhood in Scarborough. And from there, I took a pause. And that's where I started just really learning, reading some more. And then finally, I went to a multi-family event about 8 or 9 years ago in Hamilton, met up with a number of other investors. And two of the investors that I met there said to me that you need to join this real estate group out in Durham. And I heard about this group before. I never really thought much of it. And they swore up and down on this real estate group and the value that it brought to them. And then so I finally said, okay, fine, I'll give it a try. And I went a couple of times. And I think that's really where my real estate journey really kicked off. And I think that's because I was able to surround myself around like-minded people, going to these sessions, learning from them, learning from the guest speakers, understanding about different real estate strategies. And I'm a big believer in learning, like you said, personal development, and being able to have that community at this real estate group really allowed me to focus, get clarity on how to invest, where to invest, and really some of those fundamental things that I think we all need in order to become a real estate investor. So if you take away anything from this podcast is I'm a big believer in surrounding yourself around like-minded people. And one of the great ways to do that, and inexpensive ways to do that, is joining a high-quality real estate investment group.
Yeah, awesome said. Yeah, and as I was saying earlier, I think that's one of the things that you and I have in common. I think making sure that you're feeding your mind and you're also learning from other people, from lessons learned and mistakes maybe they've made, and speeding up time in your own sort of journey and how you're doing things is super important. So yeah, that totally resonates with me. I'd love it if you could talk a little bit more about your career in real estate. You've obviously worked in a few different roles over the course of your career at MPAC and at a REIT, I see in earlier in your career. And it's always interesting to me to talk to people who work in the real estate field, but who also take on some action and also invest in real estate, because there are a lot of people who really don't. They have real estate as a career, but maybe not taking that sort of second step in investing in real estate and using it as an asset, something to help them in their financial strategies. So I'd love it if you could talk a little bit more about how you got into your career and maybe how some of those roles that you've had over your career have helped you personally with your investing strategy.
Yeah, so my actual educational background is in property assessment and valuations. I can be an appraiser if I want, or work on the assessment side, which obviously helped me at MPAC. But once I graduated from that program, I was recruited to one of the real estate investment trusts, now probably the biggest real estate investment trust in Canada, Choice Properties. Previously, they were a Canadian real estate investment trust. And I was so lucky and fortunate to be a part of the transactions group. So the transactions group they're the ones buying properties, doing the dispositions, and we're talking 30, 40, $100 million properties throughout Canada. So I was in this group. My associate vice president was in charge of the land development. So I'd go to work every day pre-COVID, of course, and listen to all these transactions. I would see the transactions. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from being there was that I was listening to these guys, I was watching them, I was hearing these big deals, and it brought, I think, a calm to me in that these guys can do it, although they have way more resources than I can, that I could do it. And so it just made something that would seem so daunting before, just made it seem a lot more easily accessible for, I won't say the average person, but more or less the average person. And so I think that fear or those limiting beliefs were removed for me, because I was seeing these transactions day in, day out. Part of my job was reviewing leases. So I would see these leases from all different retailers, and just getting a better understanding of what's involved, some of those inputs in leases. And so that had a huge impact on me. Uh, and I think my perspective, more than anything else. So it really just made me a lot more comfortable to know that, yes, I can actually do this, and maybe not purchase $100 million building, obviously, to start out with, but understanding that, you know, if you put the work in, you put the time in, you really focus on mindset, and can be achievable. So that was really one of the big lessons learned from working at that REIT. And then I would say from there, I was recruited to go to MPAC, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. I really don't tell people that I used to work there, because every party I go to, or any function, they'd ask me, you do the whole, so what do you do for a living? And then if I say MPAC, the first thing I get would be, oh, you're the company that's increasing my property taxes.
Right.
But
It's only
but
bad news, right?
yeah, it's always bad news. It's always bad news, never good news.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
one of the things I really honed in on my skills there was, surprisingly, was really relationship building. Like, for me, I'm naturally a relationship person, and my role there wasn't from a property valuation perspective, although that was my educational background, was really focused on stakeholder relations. So working with city councilors, city officials, mayors, and so on. And Stephen, I'm sure you'll probably agree with me when I say this, at least to some degree, that although real estate is brick and mortar, I believe it's really more about relationships, with other investors, with your team, and so on, and even getting deals or access to deals, and being one of the first people to get access to deals. So really being able to hone in my relationship skills and abilities has served me really well, through work at MPAC. And of course, just having a better understanding of valuation and how properties are valued, more so commercial properties, again, has done quite a bit for me.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. And that makes a lot of sense. I think relationships are everything, right? Because the technical skills are one thing, but going out there and building trust with people and again, getting back to surrounding yourself with like minded people to push each other, I think is excellent as well. But yeah, that definitely resonates with me in terms of the relationships. It makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask you too. So moving forward, then you've got this career in real estate. You're taking on different roles. You're understanding assessments. You're working with large organizations such as MPAC, and then maybe talk a little bit more about how that evolved into your personal sort of real estate investing strategy. Was it? You talked about your early influences from your mother and moving that forward, but how did that sort of evolve in your real estate investing? Did it did you have an initial strategy early on and you kept it going, or did it evolve as you went and you surrounded yourself with other people doing bigger deals? And maybe talk a little bit about the evolution of that over the years.
sure. So initially, I would say I was very unsophisticated, although yes, I had diplomas and degrees and so on in property assessment taxation. But I think we all know theory is one thing and taking actions another. And so when I went to the real estate group, I saw what a lot of the investors were doing. And 6, 7, or 8 years ago, one of the big strategies or more popular strategies was the duplex conversions. And so I saw other people that were doing really successful executing that strategy. And I was like, okay, so I'll start with that strategy. And they were also doing it in Durham. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it in Durham, right? No strategy behind it. I'm not looking at fundamentals and all that stuff that I do now. And so I took the plunge. I purchased my first single family detached property in Oshawa and started the process. So, what was supposed to be a 2 or 3 month project, just adding a legal secondary suite, ended up taking me 10 months. It was an absolute nightmare. I
We've
did
all
a
had
lot.
those. Yeah.
We've all had those. And now I look back, it was a blessing in disguise because that's probably the project I've learned the most on over my past 8 or 9 years. But a lot of things popped up that I couldn't foresee. But I also made a lot of rookie mistakes, right? I hired a friend of mine that was a contractor, but he wasn't a investor focused contractor that had the expertise of completing a legal basement apartment. And so one of the things I would also tell your listeners is that always focus, in my opinion, when you build your team, is make sure that your team are really focused on are really investor focused, meaning, the real estate agent that you work with has a high portion of their clients that are investors. Your appraiser should be investor focused. Your contractor should be able to execute the strategy that you're looking to execute. So whether it's a duplex conversion, whether it's a value add for a multifamily, they need to have a large portion of their business focused in that area. But anyways, again, the project took about 10 months. It was successful. Fortunate for me, the market was going up quite a bit. I did finish the project. And again, but because there were so many mistakes, I was able to learn a ton, and being able to maneuver through different things, dealing with the city and so on. And then from there, I realized that, okay, I did it, I finished it. Yes, it was a stressful process, but now I'll move on to the next one. So I kept on buying single family detached properties in the Durham area, did executed the same strategy, the old fashioned duplex conversion, and that worked extremely well. But Stephen, I'm sure as you can imagine, all strategies don't work forever. And so I had to pivot and look at other options. And so that's where I started really thinking, okay, I think I became a lot more sophisticated, really looking at the fundamentals on different neighborhoods, what makes a good neighborhood, honing in on a different strategy and really having to pivot and moving to a different strategy. And I can talk more about some of the other projects I've worked on if you want. But
For sure. Yeah. I think so. That's a good sort of snapshot. What I maybe wanted to focus on next was how that experience and how those initial experiences and the career stuff and the investing, how did that eventually lead to you starting a college course and wanting to help others get into real estate or just learn whether or not it's right for them? Maybe talk a little bit about that and then we can branch off from there.
sure. So great question. And a lot of people ask me that, why do you teach? And if I can go back to when I was young, fresh and green, my early 20s, internet wasn't as popular back then. So we were all reading books, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, among other books. I remember a friend of mine, we went to London for a Rich Dad web seminar. and spent, I don't know, thousands of dollars back then. But my point is that I never had anyone that I could go to as a mentor back then. Again, the internet wasn't readily accessible back then. There just wasn't a lot of information available on how to become an investor, what type of strategy to use, and so on. So I really had no guidance. And my parents were both immigrants to the country, so we weren't well connected in terms of saying, "Hey, why don't you go to Uncle Joe? And he's an investor and he's got multiple properties. Why don't you talk to him?" And so it was very different back then. So that mentorship wasn't there. And so I've always said to myself that one day I want to be able to have the opportunity to help younger individuals or even just new investors and provide that guidance. So I had a chat with a friend of mine last year, telling him, this is what I want to do. I want to create a course, teach it at college. And he said, I think that's a great idea. And he connected me with the dean of George Brown College. We had a couple of conversations. He thought it was a great idea. And a year and a bit later, I've been teaching an introductory real estate investment course at George Brown. And I purposely made it an introductory course, again, to give folks the opportunity to make their way into the real estate industry and to understand how to do it, the real fundamentals on how to become an investor. And that's really why I focused it for that introductory level.
Awesome. And so how long have you been doing it now?
So this is my third semester. I take the summer off, and yeah, this is my third semester. So actually, I just had my first class 2 days ago
Okay.
for this semester. First class for this semester.
For this semester. And so talk a little bit about how the course was received. You do see a lot of seminars and conferences and different things like that, but I think it's a lot less common to see college courses teaching people how to invest in real estate. There's probably a lot of courses teaching people how to get into careers in real estate, various aspects. But maybe just talk a little bit about how it was received and what are your students saying and what's some of the feedback that you're getting.
Yeah, and so I remember I went to a mastermind a year ago, and I was at the mastermind. I was telling some of the other members there that I was thinking about doing a college course, and a couple of people said to me, "Why do a college course and tie your name to a local college? Just do a workshop. You're the brand. People are going to come there to see you and to hear what you have to say." And I got discouraged, but I still decided to move forward, and it's been very well received, and the class continues to grow. So I've gotten a ton of great feedback. A lot of the people that are coming back to the course, or sorry, a lot of people that have taken the course are taking the course, are taking it because of referrals, which is amazing to see. So one of the first things I do in my first class is I say, "Hey, how'd you hear about the course?" And again, a lot of them has been referral based, and so it's really good to see that people are actually not only referring other people to the course, but they really got something out of it. So I've had at least 2 or 3 students from every class actually take action and buy a property, which is really what I want to see, right? Like to me, it's not just about educating yourself, but the real education comes from taking action. So to me, it really near and dear to my heart when I hear students say that they've taken action and they bought a property. And so I've even done a couple meetups outside of class just for a coffee with some of my previous students to hear what they're doing, to provide further support to them. And again, it's a really nice fuzzy feeling to hear students continuing on their journey and again taking action. So I've gotten a ton of great feedback, which is great. And I continue to evolve the course, try to make it better based on some of the feedback that I've heard. But overall, I would say it's been a success. Like this semester, I have 21 students registered, which is great. And I hope the course continues to grow. Not much more than 22 because I'm a full-time investor. I have a full-time job, so it is demanding, but it's
Right.
it's been great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's amazing because for me, going back to the personal development stuff, getting somebody, you and I are both more advanced in our careers and looking at different strategies in terms of investing and things like that. But really, the major breakthrough comes from not doing anything to doing something or going from zero investments to at least one and just starting down that path and taking that first step. It must be really rewarding just to see people who maybe have been thinking about taking action or doing something, or maybe were too afraid to do something before, take that first step and just move in the right direction and start getting in the game. That must be very rewarding for you.
Yeah, it definitely is. And you're 100% right. And that was one of the things I tell my students. I tell them that after you take this $400 course, don't go and take another course. Don't spend
Right.
$20,000 to join a real estate group. Take action. And so one of the things I do for each of my students is I give them 3 hours of my time outside of class just to provide that additional support, because I'm sure we've all been there before, where we go to a seminar, we go to a workshop, we're all excited and pumped up, and then we get home and where we don't know where to go from there. And because I've experienced that myself is one of the reasons why I tell my students, I'll give you again 3 hours of my time to ask questions and so on. And it has helped
Yeah,
with my
absolutely.
students' journey.
Yeah. So maybe talk a little bit about the outline for the course. What are some of the topics people are going to learn about? How in depth you get with some of the strategies, or is it just more of getting to know what the components are and what things you should think about? And maybe just do a little overview of the course if you could.
Sure. So I start off real with the basics. I'll talk about why invest in real estate high level. I talk about the how do you know which market to invest in, and I start at a very high level. So I'll start with North America, specifically really Canada and the US, not Mexico, just Canada and the US. And I start looking at the broad fundamentals, right? So I look at all the key indicators that I look for when investing in a particular market, right? So GDP growth, population growth, some of those fundamentals, making sure that they're paying attention to those things. And then I drill down from Canada to the US, right down to Canada, to the province, to the municipality, and then right down to the neighborhood, right? Again, how to choose a specific neighborhood, how to look at rents and so on. So I do all those macroeconomic fundamentals and I drill it right down to the micro. For I think it's very important because in my mind, as long as you choose the right neighborhood, I think that's more than half the battle, and eventually your investment will do well. So again, that's one of the areas I focus on. And then I focus on 3 or 4 different strategies. So I will tweak it depending on what's currently working. So I will go step by step how to purchase a property, and then how and go right into how to convert it into a legal duplex. I'll do that with short-term rental, high level multifamily, but I really don't go into details because it is an introductory course. But I will review 3 or 4 different strategies step by step. I will also talk about some of the things I touched on earlier about the importance of surrounding yourself with people. So joining a real estate investment group. So I'll give a couple options. I'll talk about that. And then I also do a bit on mindset and personal development, because again, things that I feel are very important is focusing on mindset, personal development, and then also really talking about goal setting. So why are you investing in real estate? Because one of the first things you hear is financial freedom. I want to quit my day job. And it's very difficult to quit your day job as a real estate investor, at least in the beginning. So I try to set those expectations on and give examples of what real estate has done for me and to be realistic about your timeline. So again, it's really the fundamentals, macroeconomics, reviewing 3 or 4 different strategies step by step. And then I also bring in several subject matter experts, because although I've been investing for at least 8 or 9 years, I'm not an expert in every strategy. So I will bring in a property manager, because I don't manage my properties. I'll bring in a property manager. I'll bring in a paralegal. I'll bring in a real estate investor focused agent. I'll bring in a mortgage broker to have a conversation so they could provide value to my students on what they're great at. And then that's more or less the course outline. And then I will also tweak it depending on what my students are looking for. So again, the first class I say to my students, what are you trying to get out of this course? Tell me 1 or 2 things that you really want to get out of this course. And so if one of my students say, I want to learn about investing in cottages, then I'll bring in probably an expert, right? As long as there's a common theme from multiple students, I'll bring in an expert to do that.
Excellent. And who do you see taking the course? Is this a variety of people across the board? Is it professionals? Is it people just starting out their careers? Who are you seeing in the classes?
I would say if you look at the demographics, you're probably seeing people from age 30 to age 60, and most of them are not actual students. They have a full time job, they have a family, they either own their principal residence or they're renting and thinking about either investing or buying their own principal residence. You have professionals. My last class, I had a doctor. So you really have a wide variety of people, and I'd say the average age is probably closer to 40
Okay.
or so. Yeah. So it's a wide, diverse group of people. I have students in Calgary, which is pretty awesome. I have a student in the East Coast, so it's throughout Canada.
Oh, okay. So it's all online
Yeah, it's all online. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it. I could do it in person, but it would just take up too much time just
for sure.
traveling.
Oh,
So
that's
yes,
excellent.
it's
Yeah.
on. Yeah,
So you can benefit people from across the country. That's awesome.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Maybe shifting gears a little bit back to talking about, let's say, your investing strategy and what you're seeing out there in the market. I'd love to talk to you a bit about, maybe we'll call them smaller residential investors are looking at in the market today. And I know that a few years ago, it was a lot easier
Yeah.
to get into the market, make properties cash flow. Interest rates are obviously much lower a few years back, and now they've gone up. So I just see the market has changed a lot for people who are maybe thinking about getting into smaller scale residential real estate investing. So maybe talk a little bit about what some of the strategies are looking like now. And are people having to be a lot more creative in what they're doing? And maybe just share your experiences there.
So the market, as Dean, is very different than it was even just 2 years ago. Again, you can easily buy a duplex, sorry, buy a single family home, a semi-detached, add a legal secondary suite, the property. You refinance it, you pull out 100, 150,000, the property would cash flow maybe $100, but when you run your pro forma correctly, you're fine. That ship has sailed,
Yeah.
unfortunately, unless you go to markets like Belleville, Peterborough, and further out. And my investment strategy is I prefer to stay in primary markets. So to go to Belleville for me is not really an option. So I've had to pivot because to your point, interest rates have increased substantially. And so what used to work before again isn't working now. So some of the things that I'm currently working on is I'm currently building is really looking at my portfolio to see where I can intensify my existing portfolio. So what do I mean by that? So I own a triplex in the city of Toronto, and I'm currently building a garden suite on it. And what I'm doing though is, which works, is I'm converting the existing detached garage into a one bedroom apartment. And roughly all in, it'll cost me about 160,000. It's on the final stages of being done, but the numbers work. It makes sense. Whereas I know other investors are building garden suites from scratch and they're paying anywhere from 350,000 to upwards of 500,000. And I have friends that are building it. So these are real numbers that I'm quoting here. And so when you look at spending 350 to 500,000 on a garden suite, the numbers really don't make sense. You could, in my opinion, you could probably deploy that capital elsewhere, but spending $160,000, getting anywhere from $2,000 to $2,400 a month rent plus utilities does make sense to me. And so that's why I'm looking at opportunities where I can intensify my existing portfolio. Another area I'm looking at specifically in the city of Toronto is taking advantage of the new bylaw where you can build 4+1, so four
Right.
units in one property and build a garden suite. So I'm looking at a number of deals where I can do that once my garden suite's done. And as far as Canada, that's the only type of investing I'm doing. I'm also working on a flip with investors in Cleveland, Ohio, and that's strictly just for flipping. And I'm also now doing research in Atlanta for single family detached properties, but those will be long term holds. So those are the three strategies that I'm currently working on right now that I still think make sense. I tell my students if you don't own a home, maybe that's a great way to get started. Doing a house hack, putting in a legal basement apartment, and making the numbers work that way, or maybe going to one of those secondary markets like Belleville if you're comfortable with the fundamentals, or Peterborough, and then still doing a legal duplex. But right now the market isn't anywhere near as good as it was 2 or 3 years ago. So prices I feel have stabilized a bit, but I think we're going to need to see at least 6 to 12 months at a minimum before prices stabilize and start to go up. And that's really going to be as a result of interest rates continuing to come down.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think the market's changed a lot. I see And I think when I was first hearing about garden suites, to your point there, several years back, I thought that's a great concept. We're going to be able to use this excess land on these bigger lots that are in a lot of these older neighborhoods. And this is going to be great. And it's going to be this big investment vehicle. And I still think it has a lot of merits. But the reality of all of the red tape here in Ontario and all of the kind of development challenges and the cost of building, that's really hampered a lot of, I think, a lot of the opportunities for investors to provide quality rental housing here in this province, because it is just such a struggle, I think, to get these things built.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right. I had dinner with a couple friends. They work for some of the largest companies, real estate companies in Canada, and they told me that they've paused their development, just about 90% of their development pipeline, and it's because of exactly what you mentioned: construction costs, development charges, and of course interest rates. People talk about affordable housing. My thought is that we'll never have affordable housing in the GTA, and probably most major cities. It's just not possible because of development charges, cost of labor, and cost of material. The
Yeah,
numbers just don't work.
yeah, for sure. What are you seeing in terms of investors looking elsewhere? So I think I was talking with our friend Quentin D'Souza the other day, and he's obviously investing in other markets and helping people to look and consider markets like Florida, for example. People are looking down there for cash flow opportunities, different investing strategies down there. So are you seeing that in the market as well? And maybe through some of your students looking to invest down in the States or even in other provinces where it's a lot more landlord friendly?
Absolutely. And I found that a little shocking actually from my students, right? I hear that from investors, absolutely. But I would say at least 30% of my students do not want to invest in Ontario at all. And they're either looking at Calgary or outright in the States. And so I've actually had to pivot my curriculum to accommodate that. So last semester, I brought in, because I'm not an expert in investing in the States at all. I've just started doing research over the past 4 months. So I brought in who I felt is an expert who's been investing in the States for at least the past 8 or 9 years to have that conversation and to provide information to my students. So a lot of students are looking Texas, Florida. Again, I'm looking at Atlanta and working in Cleveland right now. But yeah, there is a huge appetite for the States on a whole. And I
Okay.
think it's because a lot of the things that we talked about, they're a lot more landlord friendly. I think we can go on and on about the benefits of investing in the States.
For sure. What I'm interested about Cleveland, what sort of led you to that market? Is it just the accessibility of it, or is it the certain market dynamics that are going on there?
Sure. So the same individual that I had on my class, and that's been investing. That's one of the areas he's invested quite a bit, and he'll flip properties. And for long term holds, I wouldn't invest in Cleveland. Like I don't think the fundamentals are that great, to be quite frank. But for active income for quick flips, the price point is pretty good. So our model is we'll buy a property. So a group of us, it's a group of investors. We'll buy a property for 130,000 US. We'll buy it cash. We'll spend 30 to $40,000 on rentals, and we'll list it. And so it's just a matter of rinse and repeat. The idea is not to get rich at all because it's a group of investors, but does allow us to have some active income. Nothing crazy. I think really for me, it's some fun money. So when I travel to the States or other areas, I don't have to change US dollars. So you're definitely not going to get rich from it. And it's something I just wanted to try to see if the model worked. So we just finished our first flip and it was actually listed last week. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome. That's great. You're branching out. I hear, as I said, I hear about a lot of people either looking or actively investing down in the States now just for more opportunities. So I'm always interested to hear people's experiences. And I think I think it's a necessity of what's going on here. The market characteristics right now on the residential side, on the small scale residential side, are just not favorable, right? So people have to look elsewhere. They've got to keep their money working for them. I think that's great that people are looking at different strategies in different markets to keep their money moving. That's for sure. Um, okay, so maybe switching gears here, Brian, a little bit. I wanted to talk a bit more about personal development side. As I was saying, I was checking out your Instagram, and you've got a lot of cool posts about some of the stuff you've been doing to challenge yourself. some of the mountain climbing. I know you recently did an adventure to Everest base camp, I think, and before that it was Kilimanjaro. You've got some really cool posts about that and what you're doing to push yourself. So I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit about that and maybe what led you to say, okay, yeah, that's something I want to challenge myself with, and how did that sort of come about?
Sure. So, as we talked about earlier, I'm a big believer in personal development. And so every other year, I will hire a business coach, a mentor, etc. And I did that last year. And as we were planning our 2023, I think it was, or, yeah, 2023, I sat in his office and he said, okay, Brian, I want you to focus on these four key areas. And one of the areas were physical and mental health. And he said, so I want you to challenge yourself. I want you to do something that's going to make you extremely uncomfortable and you figure out what that is. So I remember I was in Costa Rica with buddy Quentin, maybe a month before that. And Quentin told me he was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And I was like, I gave him the, oh, good for you in the eye roll.
Let me know how
And
that goes. Yeah.
yeah, basically. And anyway, so fast forward a month and a half later when I had that discussion with my mentor, I messaged Quentin right away and I said, hey, Quentin, I remember you telling me you're going to climb. Is there any room? And he said no. And then he messaged me back a week later. Someone had dropped out. So I signed up immediately and started training. I've never slept. I've never climbed a mountain. I'm not a hiker. I've never slept in a tent. But so I was an absolutely a newbie rookie. I had to spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars on equipment and all that good stuff. But anyways, I trained. I did altitude training. I obviously had to go to the gym and to get myself ready. But it was an absolutely amazing experience. It really pushed me way past my comfort zone. I remember the last night or last 24 hours when we were summiting, I got extremely sick because of altitude sickness. And it was a huge struggle. What should have taken me probably 12 or so hours ended up taking me about 20 hours because I was literally going step by step because I was so weak, sick. I thought I was going to faint. I thought I was going to throw up. It was a huge struggle for me, but it allowed me to do a lot of soul searching. It really got it. It made me, I would definitely say, mentally stronger, and it. I was very appreciative for that experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm thinking about some of those posts you put, and you're gasping. You're okay. We met. You could feel the pressure and the exhaustion that you had, but that's awesome. That's so good that you did that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I
and
tell people, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Rick.
I tell people that I'm not. I enjoy hiking. I think it's great. I enjoy the social aspect more than anything else. But I try to encourage people to do anything. Doesn't matter what it is that's going to make them uncomfortable. And because I truly believe when you put yourself in purposely in uncomfortable situations, that it will build resilience and it will help you to become a better parent, a better business partner. Just I think just a better person in general, regardless of what area. It doesn't have to be business; it could be anything. One of the things I've taken away from that is I every year now I do at least three or four things that's going to make me extremely uncomfortable. And again, it's not just climbing a mountain. Like I'm doing a Spartan in a couple of months, so just whatever it is, just try to do something purposely that's going to make you extremely uncomfortable.
Hmm. Excellent. And then I also see you're active with mastermind groups. Maybe talk a little bit about that and how that sort of challenges you and helps you in what you're doing.
Yeah. So one of the things I has been that's been very beneficial for me is joining a mastermind group. I would say outside of joining a real estate group, once you become, I think, better known in the community, those opportunities present themselves. And so an investor that I've known for actually that same investor that I met probably 8 years ago at that multifamily conference, he invited me to join a mastermind with six or seven other investors throughout Ontario. And it's been such a huge positive experience for me. Sitting down, so we would meet once a month. We would meet in a hotel in Durham, and we would talk about challenges, opportunities, and we would all feed into each other on how we could support each other with whatever problems or challenges we're facing. And that's actually where I got the idea to build a garden suite because the guy that was sitting right beside me, he was building a garden suite, but not just a garden suite. He was converting a detached garage into a garden suite, and he was on his second. conversion. And I was like, hey, Scott, that's a great idea. Tell me a bit more. And he started walking me through it. I had a couple calls with him. And so, again, if you have the opportunity to join a mastermind, you don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars. This mastermind I was invited into, it's free, minus paying for the hotel. But again, surrounding yourself around like minded people who are either where you want to be or that are where you are, it will pay spades in terms of your personal development, your growth. It's, I can't say enough about being a part of a mastermind.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, okay, maybe switching gears here again, looking forward to the future, Brian. Maybe talk a little bit about what your plans are. I know you've recently switched jobs in your career, and obviously you're continuing to own and manage your portfolio of real estate. But I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit more about what's coming down the pipe and maybe what some of your goals are going forward.
Sure. So I think the market in the midterm will get better. What I don't think is going to get better, at least in Canada, is the overall long term fundamentals. I think we're going to see increased pressures on rental providers. I think regulation is going to increase from the Ontario Landlord Tenant Board. I think there's going to be greater expenses for landlords, whether it's increased property taxes, more fees, etc. I think we all know productivity in Canada is lagging, and I absolutely love and adore Canada. Canada has done a lot for myself and my family, but I think there are a lot of challenges in Canada, which is why I don't see myself buying any long term holds in Ontario going forward. It will just be these small land development deals that I can build and sell. And then the bulk of my actual long term holds will be in the States, specifically the Atlanta suburbs. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on really over the next, I'd say, 36 months. And then I have a huge passion for travel. I'll continue to do that. And I have my course now at George Brown that, again, I was hoping to cap it at 10, but again, I think I have 21 students. So for me, I reached my goal, and I just want to continue to add value to students, to other people. And again, I'm a relationship person, so I love these conversations. Enjoy the camaraderie with my students, and I'm going to continue to make my class better and just move in that direction.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you see maybe a second course being added on, like maybe advanced strategies, or is it the goal is to give everybody this sort of maybe jumpstart into real estate, or do you see that evolving into other courses as well?
I don't, because again, my goal was just to help people. I really don't do this for the money. I can assure you, George Brown doesn't pay that well. It's really not worth my time, to be quite frank. But it's really to give people that opportunity, and
Yeah,
that's why I'm doing it. And I feel that I've met my goal by being able to give folks that jumpstart. There's a lot of smart people out there like yourself, Stephen, that can create an advanced course or that have advanced courses. And so that's not, for me, this is I would say, a pet project that's near and dear to my heart. Selling a
yeah.
course for more advanced students is not really my focus, and it's not really what I want to do.
No, fair enough. Yeah, yeah. As I said, I think the maximum benefit though comes from getting those people from doing nothing to something. So that
Exactly.
makes sense for sure. Okay, so Brian, as we're wrapping up, I just wanted to ask if you wanted to share any links or information, or where can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
So people can find me at on Instagram at acquiring_wisdom, or they can find me on LinkedIn. Just type in Brian Gordon, or on Facebook, Brian Gordon. But one of the best places to get a hold of me is acquiring_wisdom. I usually check it a couple times a day, so you can message me. Always happy to have a chat. And yeah, I love the real estate industry, love talking about real estate. So always happy to hop on a call and chat with potential investors.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and we'll make sure to put those in the show notes as well so people can connect with you that way. All right. So finally, just wanted to say really enjoyed the conversation today, Brian. I really appreciate your insights and thanks very much for coming on.
You're welcome. It's been an awesome experience, and hopefully, your listeners have taken one or two things away. And again, please take action, and because that's what creates traction. So, again, thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
All right. Thanks, Brian. So, hope you got some value out of this podcast episode. I invite you to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, leave a comment, let us know what you think. And for any other information about us, what we're doing, and the types of investments we're into, please visit focuscapital.ca, and on there you can find a ton of information, additional podcasts, and a lot of free resources. That's it for this podcast episode. Bye for now.